It started like any normal Mother's Day. A woman goes for a bike ride in the scenic mountains of Colorado. Her husband is away on business. Her daughters are out of town. But by the end of that peaceful spring day in 2020, Suzanne Morphew was gone. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no body, just a missing woman and a husband who suddenly found himself at the center of a murder investigation. Tonight, we pull back every layer of deception, suspicion, and tragedy. This is the disturbing case of Barry Morphew, a husband accused of killing his wife and hiding her body for years until investigators finally uncovered the truth. Welcome back to The Dark Stories, where we don't just tell true crime, we analyze it. On Mother's Day 2020, Suzanne Morphew vanished from her home in Salida, Colorado. Her daughters were away on a camping trip. Her husband, Barry Morphew, claimed he was in Denver for work, and Suzanne, she was reportedly out for a bike ride. Later that day, her bicycle was found abandoned, but Suzanne was nowhere to be seen. What followed was one of the most perplexing missing persons investigations in recent American history. For over a year, investigators searched desperately for her body, for a crime scene, for a murder weapon, but there was nothing. Only whispers. Suspicion grew, and eyes turned to the man who claimed to love her most, Barry Morphew. The investigation begins. Barry Morphew was initially charged with murder in 2021, despite there being no body, no murder weapon, and no physical crime scene. The case was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. District Attorney Linda Stanley, leading the charge against Barry, painted a chilling picture. A deeply troubled marriage, a husband with anger issues, and a possible murder staged as an accident. But Stanley's prosecution would come under fire, leading to her eventual disbarment for misconduct, not only in this case, but others as well. This legal debacle would cast a shadow over the entire investigation. What the prosecution claims. The prosecution believes Barry Morphew meticulously planned Suzanne's murder, and the clues they present are both chilling and bizarre. First, there was BAM, a veterinary tranquilizer normally only available to federal and state park officials. According to the indictment, when Suzanne disappeared, only one private citizen in that entire area had access to BAM. In a horrifying discovery, traces of this tranquilizer were reportedly found in Suzanne's bone marrow after her remains were discovered. An orange syringe cap was also found mixed in with Barry's laundry, captured on surveillance wearing shorts just hours after Suzanne disappeared. The digital evidence. Barry's phone activity raised eyebrows immediately. On the day Suzanne vanished, May 10th, Barry visited 5 different trash disposal locations. Trash runs on Mother's Day? Even stranger, surveillance data from his car showed the doors opening and closing multiple times in the early morning hours, but the vehicle never left the property. Was Barry disposing of evidence in small trips under cover of darkness? And why was his behavior so erratic that day? Motive: a marriage in crisis. The prosecution revealed deeply troubling messages Suzanne had sent to friends. I feel unsafe. I can't get away. Barry would get super angry at the drop of a hat. Text messages revealed that Suzanne had started planning for divorce. She had told her sister and friends that ending the marriage was her next move. The day before her disappearance, Suzanne allegedly texted Barry to tell him she was done. That text was later deleted from her phone, possibly by Barry himself. The tranquilizer gun and darts. At Barry's home, investigators found a tranquilizer dart gun and multiple darts. Though one deputy testified the gun appeared inoperable, prosecutors suggest Barry may have used the tranquilizer to subdue Suzanne before murdering her. The scene, they argue, was carefully staged, even down to planting her bicycle by the roadside. Barry also sent Suzanne a Happy Mother's Day text that morning, which prosecutors believe was part of his effort to establish an alibi. The trash runs. Those bizarre trash runs became central to the state's theory. Multiple stops, multiple dumpsters. Barry was seen disposing of unknown materials, yet no human remains were recovered from any of the sites. Cadaver dogs brought in later never alerted to the scent of decomposition in his vehicle. The forged ballot. Incredibly, several months after Suzanne's disappearance, Barry forged Suzanne's name and submitted her 2020 presidential election ballot. When confronted, Barry admitted forging the ballot, telling FBI agents, "I just thought, give Trump another vote. All these Democrats are cheating." While not directly tied to Suzanne's murder, prosecutors argue this fraudulent act exposes Barry's willingness to lie and break the law, even casually. The family divided. Throughout this nightmare, Barry and Suzanne's two daughters have stood firmly by their father. They believe in his innocence. Barry even transferred a house in Indiana to one of the daughters. Their support has been unwavering, despite the overwhelming suspicion surrounding their father. DNA twists that complicate everything. In a shocking twist, DNA found in Suzanne's car revealed mixed profiles tied to unsolved sexual assault cases in other states. Barry was excluded from these samples. Could Suzanne have been abducted and killed by an unknown predator? The defense argues this raises significant reasonable doubt. The defense strategy. Barry's legal team portrays him as a loving husband. No murder weapon. No ex-witnesses. No confession. No physical evidence tying Barry to Suzanne's death. They argue prosecutors have failed to prove how she died, when she died, where she was killed, or how her body was transported. Without these answers, they claim a conviction cannot meet the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. The challenges for prosecutors. Even with Suzanne's remains finally recovered in a shallow grave in remote Saguache County 3 years after her disappearance, the case remains largely circumstantial. Legal experts say convictions without a body are difficult, but convictions without clear cause of death or physical evidence are even harder. Still, the discovery of BAM in her bone marrow may be a turning point, suggesting premeditation and planning. The broader issue, femicide. This case isn't isolated. Statistics show that when women go missing, especially those seeking divorce, the perpetrator is often someone they know intimately. One haunting Reddit comment sums up a sentiment many share. Too many husbands murder their wives. Femicide remains a disturbing reality globally. Conclusion: what's next? Barry Morphew's trial will challenge jurors to weigh suspicion against proof. His behavior is undeniably strange. The evidence is deeply unsettling. But will it be enough to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt? The world watches as this case unfolds, a chilling reminder that even behind the doors of picturesque homes, darkness can fester. Outro and call to action. Thank you for watching The Dark Stories. We bring you not just true crime, but the full picture. If you found this deep dive insightful, make sure to hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe with notifications on. Tell us, do you believe Barry Morphew is guilty? Or does reasonable doubt remain? Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, stay safe.
Okay, let's unpack this one. The Barry Morphew case. It's a story that, well, it's really gripped the nation, hasn't it? A real true crime saga.
Definitely. Twists, turns.
Exactly. From, a really puzzling disappearance to a big arrest, then that shocking dismissal, and now a brand new indictment.
It keeps changing.
It really does. And you've sent us, well, quite a stack of sources, legal stuff, news reports, even what people are saying online. Our mission today is to, cut through all that noise.
Try and distill it down.
Yeah, get to the core facts, the key insights, figure out what's really going on here.
And what's so remarkable, I think, is just how much the whole narrative, both legally and publicly, can shift. Over time in a case like this one. New information popping up, even years down the line, it can totally reshape how we understand it and the whole legal landscape, too.
Absolutely. So let's rewind back to the beginning of this whole perplexing mystery. It all kicked off Mother's Day, May 10th, 2020. Suzanne Morphew, 49 years old, reported missing from Salida, Colorado. The initial story, the one given to investigators, was that she'd gone for a mountain bike ride.
And just never came back.
Never came back.
And right there, that's where the question started almost immediately. Her bike was found, okay, and then her helmet turned up maybe a mile away or so. But the scene itself, it was just baffling. There wasn't any other sign of foul play, no skid marks, no damage to the bike or the helmet suggesting a crash.
Nothing obvious.
Nothing obvious. And plus, Suzanne's Camelback, that hydration pack she'd usually take biking, found in her car, not with her.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that immediately got investigators thinking maybe the scene was staged, which is, a pretty significant detail right off the bat.
How significant is that, though? A potentially staged scene? I mean, in building a case, what kind of challenges does that throw up for investigators so early on?
Oh, it's hugely significant because if a scene looks staged, it tells investigators, okay, look really closely at the person reporting it or whoever was last with the missing person.
Right.
It forces them to think, hang on, the story we're being told might not match the physical evidence. And that's a very tough starting point for a defense to, overcome later.
And pretty quickly, the focus did shift, didn't it, to her husband, Barry Morphew. A lot of circumstantial stuff started surfacing.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Like Suzanne's own text messages to a friend seemed to paint this picture of, well, an unhappy marriage. She said she felt unsafe, stuck.
Described Barry as getting super angry at the drop of a hat, I think was the phrase.
Wow. And layered on top of that, Suzanne was actually having an affair.
Yeah, a 2-year affair. And her last known communications were actually with her lover. So the prosecution's initial theory was, okay, maybe Barry found out about this, reacted badly.
Makes sense as a theory.
It does, but it's important to remember there was no direct evidence, not at that point anyway, that Barry actually knew about the affair when she disappeared.
Right, that's a key distinction. Proving motive is tough without that smoking gun.
Exactly.
And then there's Barry's own activity around the time she went missing. His phone, for instance, was in airplane mode May 9th into May 10th.
But tracking data was still active, sort of strange.
Yeah, and his car doors apparently opened and closed 3 or 4 times really early on May 10th, like 3:30 a.m. But the car itself didn't move.
Huh, odd.
And maybe the most suspicious part, he made 5 separate trips to trash disposal spots, dumpsters, and the like on May 10th.
5 trips.
5. Now, no human remains were ever found in those spots, but the police apparently didn't find his explanation for all those trips very believable.
And investigators also turned up some, shall we say, unusual items at the Morphew place. 2 or 3 tranquilizer darts and a tranquilizer dart gun.
A tranquilizer gun? What for?
Well, Barry owned a .22 rifle, and his explanation was he used the tranquilizer darts for hunting chipmunks or maybe deer to preserve the meat, he claimed.
Okay.
And they also found a .22 caliber bullet casing near Suzanne's side of the bed. Now, these little details, they seemed kind of disparate at the time, but much, much later.
They suddenly clicked into place.
It took on a whole new significance, yeah.
So let's fast forward. May 2021, nearly a year after Suzanne vanished, Barry Morphew is arrested.
Big development.
Huge. Charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, unlawful disposal of a body. The next step was the preliminary hearing. For listeners who might not know, what exactly is that? Why is it so crucial?
Right, so a preliminary hearing, or PH, it's like a critical safety check in the legal system, especially for really serious charges like murder. It's basically a hearing before a trial where a judge decides if there is enough probable cause.
Of course.
Yeah, enough probable cause for the case to actually go to trial. It's a much, much lower bar than beyond a reasonable doubt, which you need for a conviction. And in these hearings, the evidence rules are, well, more relaxed. Hearsay is often allowed. It's mostly detectives testifying about what they found.
So not the full trial evidence yet.
Not at all. And the judge looks at the evidence in the way that's most favorable to the prosecution. They're just asking, is it likely a crime happened, and is it likely this defendant did it?
So it's a surprisingly low bar just to get it into the court system, basically. Let the process play out.
Pretty much get it past that first hurdle.
And this hearing was public, right? So that's when we first heard the prosecution's case against Barry laid out.
Exactly. First glimpse for everyone.
And it's a key legal point here. You actually can charge someone with murder without a body, even without a murder weapon, as long as there's some kind of corroborating evidence. Just a tiny bit, a scintilla, they call it.
Right. It's not like the old corpus delicti rule in every situation, especially where there's no confession involved but other evidence exists. You just need that sliver suggesting a crime.
Allows them to pursue cases even if a body's never found, if the circumstantial stuff is strong enough.
Precisely.
But then, 2022, the case just implodes. Charges dropped right before trial. What on earth happened after all that buildup?
Yeah, that was a huge, huge setback for the prosecution. It really boiled down to repeated problems on their side. Specifically, failing to follow the rules about turning over evidence that could help Barry Morphew's case.
Exculpatory evidence.
Yeah, Brady material. And the key piece they apparently withheld, DNA. From an unknown male found in Suzanne's SUV glove compartment.
Unknown male DNA, not Barry's.
Not Barry's. In fact, these were 3 partial DNA profiles linked to 3 separate unsolved sexual assault or abduction cases from 3 different states.
Wow, that sounds significant.
It's massive. Withholding potentially exculpatory DNA like that, it's not just a technical foul. It really underscores how vital due process is, how discovery rules can completely derail even a high-profile prosecution.
And the DA, Linda Stanley, she faced consequences.
She did. Later disbarred, partly for how she managed the case and also for making inappropriate comments about it to the media.
So after that dismissal, Barry Morphew sued. Filed a big $15 million lawsuit against county officials, claiming his rights were violated.
And his lawyers pushed for disciplinary action against the prosecutors, too.
Yeah, it really looked like the case might just fizzle out at that point.
It did seem that way. But then, the game changer. A truly unexpected twist that just breathed new life into the whole thing. September 2023.
Suzanne Morphew's remains were found.
Finally.
Such a monumental development. Her skeletal remains found in a shallow grave, Sawash County, Colorado. That's about, 40 miles south of their home?
Roughly, yeah. And what's just incredible is how they were found. CBI agents, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, they literally stumbled upon them during a totally unrelated search.
For another missing person, right? Edna Quintana.
That's right. Who, sadly, is still missing. But the sheer chance, the serendipity of finding Suzanne's remains that way, that's quite something.
Absolutely remarkable. And then the autopsy report came out in 2024. That was the critical turning point, wasn't it?
It really was. Cause of death. Homicide by unspecified means. Initially, they didn't find signs of physical trauma on the bones themselves.
Okay.
But the real breakthrough, toxicology. Testing revealed traces of 3 specific drugs in one of Suzanne's bones. Drugs found in a sedative known as BAM.
BAM.
Yeah, BAM, butorphanol, azaparone, and metamidine. It's a powerful tranquilizer, typically used on wildlife.
What life tranquilizer? Found in her bone.
Found in her bone. And crucially, they found a metabolite for the butorphanol that suggests the drug was processed by her body.
Meaning it got there before she died, not some kind of contamination afterward.
Exactly. That metabolite points strongly towards pre-mortem exposure. And this BAM evidence is just a perfect example of how forensics, especially toxicology, can revitalize a cold case, even without traditional trauma evidence.
And suddenly, those tranquilizer darts and the gun found at their house, they make a chilling kind of sense.
They snap right into focus. Investigators managed to link Barry directly to BAM. Records showed he'd gotten prescriptions for it, filled them back when they lived in Indiana.
Before they moved to Colorado.
Right, shortly before the move in 2018. And then, investigators checked records in Colorado for the time between 2017 and 2020 around their home area. Turns out, no private citizens or businesses nearby had obtained BAM. Only Colorado Parks and Wildlife and National Park Service folks. And none of them reported any missing supplies.
So the indictment basically said,
It concluded, and I'm quoting loosely here, that when Suzanne disappeared, only one private citizen in that whole area had access to BAM, Barry Morphew.
wow, that's specific.
Very specific.
Ah.
And it connects directly back to the darts, the gun. They even found an orange cap from a syringe, the kind used for tranquilizers, in the dryer with Barry's laundry.
In his laundry?
Yeah, including shorts he was apparently seen wearing on CCTV the day Suzanne vanished.
Good grief. So this new evidence, it also lets them completely revisit that whole bike ride story.
Absolutely. The autopsy noted biking clothes, similar to what Suzanne wore, were found with her remains. Okay. But a forensic anthropologist had a theory.
Which was?
That her body likely decomposed somewhere else first. The clothes, being synthetic, wouldn't break down nearly as fast as her body.
Ah, so the clothes might have been placed with the remains much later.
That's the suggestion. Placed there long after death.
But bolstering the staged scene idea again.
Right. And add to that Suzanne's last known phone activity, texting a friend about photos the day before she disappeared, directly contradicts the idea she went for a bike ride that morning.
So the prosecution's theory that the bike scene was staged to mislead everyone, it suddenly looks much stronger.
Well, significantly stronger.
So we've gone from this dismissed case, totally dead in the water, it seemed, to this stunning new indictment. Barry Morphew rearrested in Arizona. Just a dramatic turnaround.
Huge turnaround.
Given this powerful new forensic evidence, especially the BAM, how does that change the game for the prosecution this time? What's their strategy now?
It fundamentally shifts the entire landscape. Before, they were building a case on circumstantial evidence, a missing person. Now, they have a body, they have a cause of death ruled homicide, and they have this very specific, quite rare chemical.
Directly linked to the accused.
Directly linked. So the focus shifts from just proving she's dead to showing how she likely died, and Barry's direct connection to that means...
But it's still a challenge, right?
Oh, absolutely. The challenge now is weaving all these pieces, the circumstantial stuff, the new forensics, into a narrative that proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a much higher hurdle than probable cause. And his bond reflects that seriousness now, $3 million, cash only.
Yeah. And despite all this, Barry Morphew maintains his innocence. His lawyer's basically saying the government just decided he was guilty and is now looking for evidence to fit that conclusion.
That's the defense stance, yes.
Wow.
And the prosecution, they still have hurdles. Lingering questions. Well, still no confession from Barry. There's no murder weapon in the traditional sense, right?
Huh.
BAM is a chemical, not a gun or a knife tied directly to the act. There's no single defined crime scene where they can say definitively the murder happened here. The cadaver dogs didn't alert in Barry's car, which the defense definitely used before.
Right, countering the body disposal theory.
Exactly. And don't forget that unknown male DNA in Suzanne's car, that's still out there? A point the defense will absolutely hammer on, suggesting other possibilities.
And Barry's behavior, that's been under scrutiny the whole time, too.
Constantly.
Reporters mentioned him crying during the preliminary hearing when texts about loving his wife were read.
Yeah.
But then you have locals describing him as acting, well, weird after she disappeared.
Yeah, hanging around town, going to events like nothing happened.
There was that story about him sunning himself topless at a kayaking competition.
Right, and apparently not going to vigils held for Suzanne. Those Oh Suzanne videos he posted also struck some people as suspicious. And then there were the holes in his alibi for that work trip on Mother's Day, leaving early without telling an employee, not having the right tools.
Spending barely any time at the job site.
And the motel room reportedly smelling strongly of bleach. Individually, maybe explainable, but taken all together, it raises questions.
It paints a picture. And then there are the daughters. Their perspective in all this must be just heartbreaking.
Unimaginable. They've stood by their father consistently, believing he's innocent. Sources describe them as basically orphans now.
And this new affidavit with the BAM evidence, it's described as quite damning for their father.
It must be incredibly difficult. Barry apparently transferred an Indiana house to the older daughter, and the younger one lives near where he was just arrested in Arizona.
This case really shows how that court of public opinion operates, doesn't it? Often clashing with the slow, careful pace of gathering actual evidence.
Absolutely. And it highlights the huge challenges in no-body murder cases historically. They're notoriously hard to prosecute, especially if the accused denies it from day one.
And you mentioned political pressure, too, on DAs, judges.
Yeah, in these high-profile cases, there can be immense pressure on elected officials. Sometimes finding probable cause might almost feel like passing the really tough decision onto a jury.
Hmm.
And it makes you think about other cases, how perceived weird behavior gets interpreted. Sometimes it fuels suspicion, like maybe with Christopher Watts.
Mhm.
Other times, like with Amanda Knox, maybe inconsistent behavior gets misinterpreted and contributes to wrongful charges.
It really shows how subjective interpreting behavior can be.
Exactly, how the presentation of facts and how someone acts under immense stress and scrutiny can be viewed in such wildly different ways by the public and even within the legal system itself.
It's just striking, isn't it? This interplay of circumstantial evidence, the huge impact of new forensic breakthroughs like the BAM, and then public perception, all shaping how justice is pursued, especially when key pieces were missing for so long.
It really is. The Morphew case, it just keeps unfolding, revealing these layers of human behavior, the power of science, and all the legal hurdles. Finding Suzanne's remains, especially with that BAM evidence, gave the prosecution something crucial they lacked before.
A massive piece of the puzzle.
A massive piece. But those lingering questions, no confession, no traditional scene or weapon they mean in this case, even now, still has a really challenging road ahead to get to a final resolution.
It just demonstrates the incredible complexity, doesn't it? Forensic investigations, legal battles, especially in the glare of the public eye when answers take so long to surface.
Absolutely. It leaves you wondering, even with everything we know now, what's the single most compelling piece of evidence? Or maybe what's the biggest unanswered question that still hangs over this whole tragic case? Something to definitely keep thinking about.